Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Restoring the Soul podcast. We are glad you're listening, and a special friend of the podcast is back today, Sean Seay from Athens Church in Athens, Georgia. Welcome, my friend.
Hey, Michael, so good to see you, man. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a joy for me because about once a month or so, we don't always hit once a month, and sometimes it's every 3 weeks. We get to just kind of check in a friendship, mentoring, walking with one another basis. And it's fun to do this. We've talked about it for a while. But we're now moving toward 11 years, but you've had your
That's right.
10-year anniversary of doing an intensive at Restoring the Soul, for which you were kind enough to actually do a podcast several years back. But tell me
Yeah,
about like the 10-year anniversary and what it was like then and now. That's really what I want to cover here.
no doubt, no doubt. Would you like me to start with the story that kind of led me to you in the first place, or do you want me to start with the anniversary celebration? I'll go either way.
Let's start with the story at the beginning, because that's a hard but a great story.
No doubt, no doubt. So yeah, I am I'm in my mid 50s. My wife Bonnie and I got married in 1992. We started our church here in Athens, Georgia in 2004. And then by 2009, we had 3 kids. We had a growing ministry. I like to say we were beautiful on Instagram at that time. You know, like everything looked great from the outside. We took really good family photos. But the truth is, man, when you got under the hood, there were just a lot of unhealthy things. I mean, for me, I was really battling anger and control and just so many unhealthy patterns and rhythms. Bonnie would tell you she was battling codependency and just, not really living healthy herself. We both come from really, really broken homes. And so all of that was beginning to take a toll. You and your listeners know this better than anyone, but this is kind of the way that I've said it for years. I tell people all the time, I say, when you get past the formative years of your life, you think that they're behind you, but you come to find out they're actually inside you. And so we found that out at that point in time in our ministry. And we had this kind of defining moment weekend for us. It was a Labor Day weekend of 2012. I was cooking breakfast for the kids. Bonnie was in another room, and a bomb went off in our home. And unfortunately, that bomb was me, and it was my control and really anger and rage at that time. Bonnie came in to de-escalate things, which in my unhealth only escalated things. And so before you know it, we were in a really, really unhealthy place. And looking back, that was like such a turning point for our family, because that weekend, Bonnie made a couple of phone calls. And the first call she made was to my mentor. And my mentor said, the next call you need to make is to his accountability partners. And by the grace of God, I had these men in my life. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. It wasn't very long before the elders of our church got involved. And there were a pretty significant group of people that could see kind of under the hood of my life, which was really humiliating experience, very humbling, but at the same time, just so needed in retrospect. So that group of people had a conversation, and they said, hey, we want to help Sean be the healthiest version of him, which is incredible, by the way, that they even chose that approach rather than just kind of throw me out with the old trash. They said, we want to help Sean be the healthiest version of him. What if we gave him, I remember my mentor's term was, gave him the gift of time. And we didn't even really know what that was. I don't come from a ministry background that does sabbaticals, so that wasn't normal for us. But we decided to label this as a sabbatical, figure out a way to help Sean get as healthy as possible. And I literally remember, Michael, I was doing some online research. I want to say I was on like a Focus on the Family website over, a decade ago, something like that. I don't know where I was. I run across this thing that says Restoring the Soul Counseling Intensives. And I'm like, wow, that sounds interesting. And so I remember looking into it. I reached out to you guys. I remember I was able to get a phone call back then, kind of an intake call with you. And you ended up having a call with Bonnie. And we decided that a 2-week intensive would be a really big step. So December 2013, I made my way to the Restoring the Soul offices. I remember driving from my hotel to the office one of the mornings, and the dashboard temperature said 0. And I was like, okay, wow, we're not in the Southeast anymore. That was fun to get adjustment. But oh my goodness, I mean, I feel like what God started in those weeks together has just borne insane fruit, and I feel like I want to carry around a Restoring the Soul flag at all times. Just telling everybody to take advantage of this opportunity because it was just so big for me, for my family, for my entire church. So that's kind of where it all started. Yeah, little over a decade ago.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't take for granted that you're the lead pastor at a very, very large church with national influence, and for you to share all that. There's a lot of people who may be in ministry listening going, holy, fill in the blank. I would never share that. But I also want to say that if you come and do an intensive at Restoring the Soul, we're not going to put you on a podcast. You and I have
That's
formed
good.
a friendship because
For
we stayed
sure.
in touch. You invited me to come to your church and do a leadership
Hmm.
retreat with your staff,
Hmm.
as well as do some speaking at the church. And so, we've
Hmm.
had a lot of ongoing connection. And later on in the episode, I want to ask you about the impact on your church. But can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what you shared in the very first podcast you did, where what was the impact of the 2 weeks here?
Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, and I would love to mention as well my relationship with Restoring the Soul definitely did not end at that 2 week intensive, as powerful as that was. I feel like I'm moving toward being some sort of a record holder for intensives. I don't know if that's the case, if there's like a leaderboard there, but I feel like I'm
Frequent
trying to.
flyer.
Yeah, I feel like I'm trying to work my way up. I think it's like buy 10 get one free or something like that. So anyway, trying to get there. Yeah, I mean, Michael, the impact, specifically in 2013 was just astronomical. I mean, I've said this to many other people before, but I think specifically, obviously, Restoring the Soul is larger than you, but you're the first person that I interacted with. Um, the way that you interact with me. So I am a strong, driven leader. I'm a type A type person. I'm an Enneagram 8. I'm a D on the disc. I'm kind of all of those. Um, I say that I'm all of those wirings that you don't even have to take the test and people tell you what you are.
Yeah.
So you don't have to take the Enneagram test and they go, oh, you're an 8, trust me. Um, but anyway, nevertheless, so typically for that type person, a lot of times the approach is like a really direct kind of in your face approach with that individual, but you were just so much more mature than that, and compassionate and empathetic, and you just gave me a really really safe space to be myself, which was just so big for me, and incredibly grateful for that. The image, you didn't physically do this, but the image that came to my mind was like, rather than sitting across the table from me, you came and sat beside me and put an arm around me and said, hey man, I'm here for you, and I want to help you. And you did say that to me specifically. You said, "Hey, look, I'm not your wife's counselor. I'm not your church's counselor. I'm yours. I'm here to be here for you." And man, oh man, it just helped me lower my guard. I mean, Michael, as well. I spent the better part of 3 days just sharing my story, and you're taking notes and taking it all in. And again, it was a 2 week intensive, so we had plenty of time together. And I distinctly remember you making, I describe it as you making a presentation to me of this is Sean Seay as I see him. And you shared a couple of things that I am, 11 years on the other side of right now. And I remember distinctly. And they were so powerful for me. And it just gave me some insights to my story and my wiring and how I've become who I am. And I think it allowed me to give myself a little bit of grace. You know this, Michael, but people who aren't willing to give themselves any grace usually don't give others very much grace either, right? And so I was pretty hard on myself as well as others. And I think it allowed me to begin to have some compassion for myself as well. So that was just massive for me. You introduced me to Brene Brown, to the concept of empathy, shame. That was all brand new to me at the time. I mean, I was just a typical hardworking, read your Bible, try to tough it out and love God guy. And I think, through our time together, it opened up several new categories for me in such a way that I really believe that I was able to return home, not a fully healed man, not a fully restored man, but a man whose soul was in a new place, and was just able to enter back into life in a really really fresh way. So it was just, I mean, again, I could go on and on, but it was really powerful for me. So feel free to ask me to elaborate on any of that or whatever direction you want to go from there.
No, that's all so rich. And as you're sharing all that, I've got, memories in my head of sitting with you, not once, not just for that 2 weeks, but even beyond that. And I'm putting myself in those places when those conversations were happening, and beautiful memories, but also heavy for, the parts of you that experienced pain in your past and in your story, and heavy for the parts of your marriage that were really hard back then. I think one of the things I love and respect most about you, Sean, is your commitment, knowing what you know about who you are as a leader and how God made you to really get things done. And to, I think of an earth mover. You can move a lot of earth, and you have, and God has used you to do significant things in your church and in your community. But you have a commitment to just continue plotting and plowing to do whatever work God puts in front of you. And I
Thank
remember
you.
it took a while because you didn't go home and you weren't saying, "Hey, everybody, I'm different and I changed." But I remember as we would talk through the next year or so, you were like, "Hey, guess what? I just showed a Brene Brown video, to 6,000 people on Sunday morning," and
Hmm.
then you would start to do talks that were really seasoned with a lot of the wisdom that you were gleaning and some of the maybe different vocabulary, but out of these ideas of what you were learning. And you didn't give in to the temptation to, hey, if I teach this to others, maybe it will stick to me. You were really careful, it seems, to let things kind of come out of you and grow organically. But I think what I'd also like to take a little bit of time and talk about, and this is something I'm very, very grateful, and I've not seen this model of leadership, but you went back to your church, and I think it was actually afterwards, where as a result of your experience, you instituted, or you had recently instituted, that all of your quote senior leadership, a team of
Hmm.
6 or 8 or so, would then get a sabbatical every 10 years.
Hmm.
And you also instituted that during that sabbatical that people could choose where to go for counseling and to take some time to get away. And many of them have
Yeah.
come to Restoring the Soul. So talk to me a little bit
Yeah.
about the impact of your time and how that's trickled down directly and indirectly to the team.
Oh, for sure. Well, I want to say, first of all, not only an incredible, debt of gratitude that I owe to you and to the ministry of Restoring the Soul for loving me, for investing in me, and being so gracious to me. Also to my incredible wife, who, had walked with me 20 years of marriage prior to that time and has now, walked another 11 after that. But also just the elders of our church. I mean, I say this to our staff all the time, Michael, but I don't think there are a lot of places that will allow you to be in process as a leader.
Mm,
And I think that says a ton about our leadership. And I'm really, really grateful for that because it gave me the grace to not need to act like someone that I'm not.
mm,
It gave me the grace to be able to say, hey, this is me. I am a guy who's matured in a lot of ways, but I have a lot more ways to go. And they were just incredibly gracious, and I'm just super super thankful for that. So yeah, when I got back, they obviously began to see some of the things that God was doing in my life, and it opened up a whole new level of conversation. I mean, truthfully, Michael, for most of our ministry, we had just been. I'm maybe going to be a little bit too crass in this or whatnot, but just focused on ministry logistics, right? We're just trying to make things happen in this organizational leadership category. And I think through this season, we were able to lift the hood and go, hey, let's look at what's going on inside. And now, here we stand, Michael, in 2024. And is there a month that goes by that we don't hear another story of a fallen leader? I don't think there is. I don't think we ever make it through a
Right.
month now without hearing another one of those stories. And so I'm so grateful that we were able to do that. And so, um, our elders, I remember this, conversation coming up about, hey, I'm sure there are other people in our, organization who could benefit from something like this. And they just took the approach of, what if we could do this proactively rather than reactively? What if we could say to our leaders, hey, let's help you not get to the place to where your marriage isn't sure if it's going to make it. Um, and so we decided to connect that to some longevity and faithfulness in our church. Like you said, it started with our leadership team. It's actually now our entire church. So it doesn't matter what your role is. If you were here for 10 years, we will offer you a paid sabbatical, 8 to 10 weeks, depending on your role in the organization. But it is full time off where we say, don't check your email once. We ask everyone to get off social media. We actually tell people we don't even encourage you to go to church here during that time. Lots of people don't even go to their small group during that time, mainly just so, again, you don't get caught up in church stuff unnecessarily. But yeah, we say, hey, we'd love for you to read some things and spend some time with God and do some fun experiences with your family and all that. But two really important things for us is, if you're married, there would be some intentional time to work on your marriage. And then whether you're married or not, there'd be some really intentional time to work on your soul. And I think I'm now at, I don't know, probably 10 or more of our staff that have come to Restoring the Soul for an intensive, for either themselves and or their marriage. That's been really neat. We've had some people come. Actually, Bonnie and I did this last year where we came back, but we did, she actually did a week by herself. And then I did another week, and then we did a week together, and just so good. I mean, just so good. So yeah, that's now become a part of our culture, and it's something that we budget for and prioritize, and just wouldn't trade it for anything. We've actually got one of my awesome staff members in the next couple months is about to head out for her first sabbatical. So we're really excited about that.
And I was with our mutual friend Ross, who in the past has
Yeah,
been one of your elders, and
that's right.
he's become a good friend. And he was in Denver with a group of dudes that they were just here to see a concert and do some hiking. And he called me up on a Saturday night. He goes, "Hey, come and meet these guys." There were 10 of them, and dude, right next to me at the dinner table is one of the pastors from the church, and
Oh, that's
I remember
awesome.
meeting him a couple of years ago. So it's been so fun to, if you will, develop a relationship not just with you and with some of these leaders, but with the organization. And
For sure.
historically, I have loved to partner with churches. When my book came out in 2012, I became, quote, the porn addiction guy. And so churches would say, hey, come and give this talk. And very quickly, I learned that I was going to burn out and I couldn't do enough talks. But what I started to pray about and say, Lord, I want to develop relationships with churches where I
Hmm.
just don't go in and do a 1 hour talk and never see them again. So it's been really neat to have this relationship. So let me ask this. How has that sabbatical, let's take this separately, first sabbatical, and then maybe the process of engaging at Restoring the Soul. And by the way, you don't mandate Restoring the Soul, and I'm all for this. You basically let people explore, where they want to go, because there's other good programs even within your state. But
For
how
sure.
has the sabbatical played out for your organization? Because that's a very generous gift to start to do that. I've worked with and consulted with churches. They have multi-million dollar budgets, and when it's suggested that even the senior pastor or lead pastor gets that, they're like, oh, that's we can't do that. But you're doing it with everybody after 10 years.
Michael, I was on a call last week with a really large, successful church pastor, and he said, there's no way our elders would go for sabbatical. He said, in their minds, hey, in my company, we don't do that.
Right.
We all work hard. Like, why would we need to do that? And they just, They don't see the significance of that. I mean, Michael, I mean, the question of, like, why is it worth it? Or, why would we be willing to make that sort of impact? Number one, you know this, but I want every single person that works at our church to be a healthy, mature follower of Jesus.
Hmm.
And that's a very hard thing to do. I mean, look at the Barna research out there of where most people are in ministry and how many of them are dying to get out. And again, the sad stories that I just alluded to are all too common. So let me tell you what's expensive, by the way. What's expensive is having to come up and clean up behind a fallen, broken leader who has destroyed the trust of your organization and has, maligned the name of Christ, not intentionally on anybody's fault, but when one of those stories happens, man, it is unbelievably hard on your organization. We actually had a instance a few years ago of someone who was newer in our organization, but just made some choices that have just been unbelievably hard for us to come up and repair come up and repair behind those. So I would say the investment is way smaller on the front side to invest in a leader, to help that leader to stay healthy and to help that leader have some longevity and maturity and growth in the organization compared to, what it's like to clean up behind someone when they've had a period of brokenness. And I read something by Dallas Willard recently that just said, if you are in ministry, you need to understand you are a prime target of the enemy. And he actually said, and so is your family. And so the understanding that this is a unique calling, not everybody has this calling. It comes with unique standards. I was when I was talking to this friend about his board not understanding this, I said, to your board members, by the way, who make about 3 times as much money as you do, for them to recognize, hey, if they have an affair this weekend, they're going to go back to work on Monday and their boss is going to say, hey, just meet the quota. Sorry about your marriage. Move on. If that happens to us, they're going to say, hey, I would like your computer and your keys. You're no longer needed here. It is a completely different kind of pressure when you serve in leadership in the local church, and it affects every area of your life. And I don't say that begrudgingly. Matter of fact, 1 Timothy 3, Paul says, if any of you wants to be a leader in the church, here's the standards, right?
Right.
You got to have that desire. So yeah, we've just decided it's way better to invest in people on the front side than repair people on the back side. And I think, I don't remember who said the saying that it's better to build boys than to mend men.
Mm.
And so I think that same, idea applies here. So yeah, I get it. It is an investment. No two ways about it. But the truth is it's an investment either way on the front side or the back side. And we're really thankful for this approach.
That hypothetical organization that your peer was at, that decision, I wanna believe is not economic. Like, we can't afford this. That may be the issue on the front end, but I think it's really a cultural one. And what that is that it's an over corporatized understanding of a church. And I know this can be a straw man argument when people say, the mega church is just a corporation. But my compliments to you sincerely, and I've said this to you before, I've been around a lot of churches over the last 30 years and worked with a lot of pastors. And Athens Church is as healthy a mega church in terms of its size as any I've seen, because you have all the excellence of an extraordinary corporation, and you expect a lot of your staff, but you actually see the souls of your people and you see them as people, so that anybody, regardless of their role, gets that sabbatical. Now, I have to ask this, just because this is just something I would love to do, but does that mean the custodial staff and the lighting crew and everybody gets a sabbatical every 10 years?
That's it, man. Yeah, by the way, we have an interesting part about our church in that we run a really small staff. Actually, the percentage of dollars we spend on staffing is one of the lowest in the country. We there's surveys where we're able to compare those kind of things with other churches. We intentionally hire leaders, and so yeah, there are a number of things like custodial things, for instance, that we contractually hire that out. So those aren't full time staff members here. But yes, it does apply to every single individual in our organization. And the lady that I just referred to that's about to take her, she's got to be the, I don't know, 12th to 15th person on our team that has taken a sabbatical. And so we've got it all laid out on a document, and it'll just keep rolling. And again, I just took my second one last year. And so it had been 10 years.
Right.
And I, as I stated, came back out and restoring the soul with me and my wife, and so glad that I did. It was an awesome experience.
I just got to comment on this because I was just listening to, I think I've told you before, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts because when I have downtime and I have a very short commute, like less than 5 minutes to my office, I just don't listen to anything. But I turned on who you introduced me to, Carey Nieuwhof. And he had my hero, Gordon McDonald, who's now 82 years old, on the
Yeah.
program. And it was a really long conversation. And it was really, really wonderful. But one of the things I remember Gordon talking about years ago, to watch for leaders and kind of their unhealthiness, is the simple entitlements, like the lead pastor gets the closest parking space and
Mm-hmm.
what that begins to communicate to others. And if you were just to say, well, myself and the executive pastor and the associate pastor, we get sabbaticals, but others don't. But to take it down to every single person, that's extraordinary that you're doing that. And the other thing I'm struck by about Athens, and you're being gracious talking about restoring the soul, but I want to give kudos to Athens Church because I know so many people there. You guys have a lot of retention and longevity. At
Mm-hmm.
churches your size, it's actually pretty common for people to rotate through and to move on to other positions. But you've got people who are lifers there because they're just so satisfied with what they get to do and how they get to do it.
Oh, thank you for that. I mean, you made a really gracious comment earlier that you felt like we were a healthy organization, and that means a ton to me. I mean, that's incredibly important. I'm in my 20th year here. We as I mentioned, started in 2004, and yeah, I mean, goodness, Michael, you know how much of our lives we spend at work, right? I mean, it's an incredibly high percentage of our time. And I want this to be the kind of place that people love working. I want it to be the kind of place that they feel like they can be themselves. They feel like they can become the healthiest version of themselves. That after serving here, they become more mature and more healthy through the years rather than the opposite. And so, yeah, I don't know what all the factors are of that. I do think God has helped us create a unique culture. But I will say this. I mean, Michael, I'm going to flip it back around on you. Okay, I'm about to do a little judo here, but I don't think that was the case prior to 2012. I
Mm.
really don't. I think we were great people, and I think we love God, and we were all trying our best. But I don't think the culture would have been described the way you're describing it right now. But what happens is, this every culture is dramatically impacted by the leadership. Anybody that doesn't believe that, just hire, a drill sergeant as your next CEO, turn everything over to them, and see how things go in 6 months, and see how happy everybody is with their job satisfaction. But I came back, and again, they gave me the grace to slowly mature and allow God to do some things in my life, which just made me a more gracious person in general, a more compassionate, understanding person. And that has just translated into our church as a whole, to the degree that I really believe now when people walk into our church, I think they experience the grace of God. I think they feel like they're loved and valued for who they are as an individual, and it doesn't matter what they have on or what their background is or whatnot. And so, yeah, I think everybody loves to be a part of a culture like that, but it's hard to maintain. And it takes a lot of courage. You got to have a lot of other people that are willing to be vulnerable and authentic as well. And so, yeah, I'm really, really grateful. But I really believe that began at the intensive we did together in 2013. And I think now we're a decade on the other side of it, experiencing a lot of really great fruit from it.
So I'm taking a little bit of a turn here, and because we're friends, you won't take offense or be surprised by this. But you said how you're in your mid-50s, and you've been at the church 20 years, and you did the
Mm-hmm.
intensive 10 years ago. So one might think you would have it all together and you're fixed, right? Because I give you the names of all the right books to read, and you're done. You're sanctified. Just kidding.
That's it. That's
What are
it.
you surprised by at this stage in your life, in your own life? I mean, you've been doing this work for a decade internally, doing the healing work. And we've often discussed how slow change can be and all the different pathways and routes and experiences we need to have and go down. So, what are you surprised by at this stage?
I would say I'm really positively surprised by some of the new trends I would see in like the Big C church as a whole right now. And what I mean by those is a lot. I have great respect for John Mark Comer and John Tyson and others who are helping us get in touch with some ancient practices in the church. Speaking, you mentioned Carrie Newhoff's podcast, but Carrie interviewed John Ortberg not long ago. They had a really good conversation about the tension between organizational leadership and spiritual formation, and how organizational leadership is so incredibly important, but it doesn't necessarily always result in spiritual formation. In spiritual formation, the Dallas Willards of the world are incredible. They're not always great organizational leaders, and how important both of those are. And I would say I grew up, was kind of raised spiritually in the organizational leadership end of things. I went to Dallas Theological Seminary, was trained in the scriptures, went Howard Hendricks Leadership Institute, phenomenal, all just so, so good. But there was a lot that I didn't understand about just the long-term pathways and disciplines that are going to help me really be formed into the image of Christ. And so I'm positively surprised at the uncovering of those, if you will, and bringing those back into the light. I mean, things like silence and solitude and Sabbath, and fasting and other habits, spiritual disciplines like that are so powerful. So I'm really grateful for that. I would say also, Michael, um, I'm surprised by what we're all learning about the role of digital devices in our deformation. I think, we're now, 15 years or so on the other side of these coming out. And I don't think most of us realize that the technological realities of our world are forming us, whether we like it or not. And so I think the degree of that, I think about Jonathan Haidt's new book, The Anxiety Generation, and, what he is discovering there and trying to help people understand as well. So yeah, I would say the recognition that we're all on a train as a culture, moving in a direction that isn't great for our souls, and then also the uncovering of some of these ancient practices and bringing those kind of into the light for leaders as a whole and for churches. I'm really, I wouldn't have seen either of those coming, 5 or 10 years ago, but I'm really, really grateful for both, and it's having a big influence in my life.
Thank you for both of those. The beautiful thing about John Tyson and John Mark Comer, and my friend Ian and I lead a cohort of 7 leaders over the course of a year. And the upcoming year, we're using John Mark's book on the way of Jesus.
Yes.
And the thing is that what John Mark has done is he's brought to the forefront into a popular, accessible way a lot of the material that Ortberg and Willard and Jim Smith and Richard Foster, and of course for centuries more Catholic and contemplative theologians and writers have talked about spiritual formation and the interior life. And it really does seem like there's a trend where now people are seeing this on the front burner and on social media. And I'm seeing more and more people that are familiar with the language and exposed to it. And as far as the social media part goes, that's something that I lament, and I'm regularly convicted in my own life. The same group of leaders that I was working with, they started talking about how they're seriously considering getting unsmartphones, just
Yes.
because they're starting to realize they can't pull away from it, so not having email on their phone. And some of that starts to get pretty radical. But to your point, which many people have said, and John Mark and Dallas have, I think the people that made this famous, that we are being spiritually formed. It's not a matter of spiritual
Yes.
formation happens when we show up and start meditating in silence or practicing contemplative prayer. We are being spiritually formed one way or another. And so Meta
Yes.
is spiritually forming us, and Instagram is spiritually
Yes.
forming us. And I call it practicing the presence of everything else, but
Yes.
practicing the presence of God. And I think there's times where I just feel overstimulated and overwhelmed, and I want to throw my phone against a brick wall. And it takes a lot of inertia and a lot of intentionality to to slow down or stop that speeding train that you mentioned.
I mean, I actually heard Comer say, I mean, this was 5 or 7 years ago, but I heard him say that the greatest barrier to spiritual maturity in most people's lives right now is the iPhone. And I think what's crazy, Michael, is how incredibly quickly this has become normalized. And I mean, you can give these sort of things to your 85-year-old grandparents, and they'll be lost for hours on their iPad or whatever. It's definitely not just kids. It's just had a major impact. Matter of fact, pastor in Nashville, Darren Whitehead, wrote a book called The Digital Fast, and our church is actually going to do this in the spring of this next year, where we all take an intentional fast period away from our devices and learn how to use them in more utilitarian ways rather than addictive ways. So that's a major part of discipleship right now, right? I mean, that's a part of helping people understand, how do you follow Jesus in this age, this way. And so, yeah, it's something I'm super grateful for.
And one of the things that I appreciate about you and your church, and we seem to be playing badminton or pickleball or tennis, paddling back and forth, but is that you talked about how it's the greatest barrier to spiritual maturity, but so few people are having the conversation about what spiritual maturity actually is. It's
Yeah.
not just knowing your Bible more, it's not just attending church more and doing service, but it's actually being remade on the inside in our interior world to become more whole and more loving and to live more in union with God. And I just appreciate how you guys are talking about that.
Oh, thanks, man. It's so funny when you look at church history, right? I mean, there's so many different church denominations that have kind of majored in a certain area, and they've kind of made that the measurement of spiritual maturity, right? And so whether it's we're a serving church, or we're a worship church, or we're a Bible teaching church, or we're a missions church, or we're a whatever church. And so it's easy to do that. I love the book Sacred Pathways by Gary Thomas, who says, look, there's lots of different ways to connect with God. It's important to figure out what yours is. But yeah, I do think there is a greater clarity and understanding around what spiritual maturity looks like. And one thing is 100% sure: we will never reach the likeness of Christ, which is right. That's our goal. That's our destination. How do we become as much like the person of Jesus through our personality and our wiring and our temperament? But we're never going to do that with a broken soul. It's impossible. And so the opportunity to be able to do some of that work in a safe space, which is what you've provided for me and for our church, has just been, yeah, absolutely life changing. I can't imagine a ministry leader or a pastor in any area not taking advantage of an opportunity like this. And listen, it's expensive. Everything's expensive right now, but it sure is an investment that's worth it from my perspective.
Well, Sean, thank you for your time and your heart, and for, again, being willing to share today. I don't take it for granted, and I'm grateful for how you lead, leading with all kinds of strengths and abilities, but also leading out of vulnerability. And that is so powerful.
Oh, thanks, Michael. It's, I'm so grateful for you. It's honestly such a more freeing, liberating way to lead. The weight of leadership is so heavy as it is, but when I can begin to get comfortable with who I am with God and where I am on this journey, and I can begin to say, look, I'm trying to follow Jesus just like you are. And I've got a lot, I'm doing some things really well. I'm doing some other things, not so well. But if you want to, come alongside, we'll journey in this together. I think it allows us, I mentioned earlier, you took a bit of a side by side approach to me from a counseling perspective. And I think it allows me to take a little bit of a side by side approach to the people that I'm walking with from a pastoral perspective
Mm.
rather than a top down. And so I think in the past, so many leaders have felt the pressure to be someone that they're not, and that's an exhausting way to live. And
Mm.
so, yeah, I'm super grateful that you guys have helped us to be able to do so from a more healthy and holistic place. I will forever be grateful. That's for sure.